Good morning and a warm welcome to the GreenS webinar. It's the fourth webinar in a series we are having, and today we are talking about calculating CO2 and energy savings. And it's really great to have you all here. Currently we have 18 people listening in. I'm pretty sure that we will be one or the other more soon. And this topic is quite interesting in light of the climate change and mitigation and adaptation policies, conferences, outcomes, COP22 coming up and all those things. And I'm really pleased to have Angelika Tisch from IFZ Graz with us today, who's talking about a methodology and experiences that we have made within the GPP 2020 project over the past 3 years, which really great results in terms of estimations for those savings. So this webinar is taking place in the framework of the GreenS project. I know that many of you are partners that are listening in, so that's also the purpose. But some of you are also from energy agencies within the networks of our partners. So a warm welcome to you also to those, to the series, to this webinar in particular. If it's the first time for you in WebEx, as attendees, you are all joining. You can listen in, but you are automatically muted. The webinar will be like that. Angelika Tisch will have her presentation now. You can make use of the chat window that you will find in the top right button, and have a chat to Angelika or to myself or to the whole group, asking your question. You will find me there in the chat with the name ICLA Europe Web Conference, the host. And I will start collecting your questions throughout the whole webinar. At the very end of the webinar, we definitely have enough time for some questions and answers. And if need be that a question was really that you could not follow anymore and you have put this in the chat, then I'm more than happy to also, with a bit of kindness, interrupt Angelika. I've agreed with her this during her presentation. With no further ado, I would like to hand over to you, Angelika. You have your presentations are loaded. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Philip. Hello to all the participants. I'm glad to be with you today, and like Philip already mentioned, I've worked with him and ICLA for 3 years in the GPP 2020 project, and now I'm going to present some of our results or the way that we calculated the energy and the CO2 savings of green tenders. So let me introduce you to the structure of my presentation. We have 1.5 hours. I wanted to start with a short round of introduction because I didn't know that we would be those many people. So I suggested, and Philip agreed, that I only introduce myself, because if everybody would introduce himself or herself, it would take too much time. So after I introduced myself, I'm going to talk about the scope, so what we took a look at in our calculation of energy and CO2 savings. And then I'm going to talk about the method, so when to use the method and how we calculated the savings. So it's a bit of a theory. And afterwards, I wanted to give you an overview of the 4 calculators that we developed in the project, and show you a video of 1 or 2 calculators. But we've seen before the webinar started that there are technical problems. So I will not show you a video, but I will show you 1 or 2 calculators and introduce them to you. And you can choose which of the calculators you want to see. And after that, I would like to show you some of the results of our calculations. In our project, we've developed tender models for each of the green tenders that we've finalized on the project. And so we had 114 tender procedures, and now we have 114 tender models, and I would like to show you one or two of them, and also show you one of the Dutch tender models, which are, from my point of view, also very interesting because they use another calculation tool. And at the end, we are going to have a discussion. So I'm pretty sure that we have enough time for the discussion, and I'm looking forward to that. Like Philip mentioned, if you have a question, please use the chat button, and Philip is going then to tell me that somebody has a question, and I can stop my presentation and answer your question. Okay, first introduction. So you see here Austria, and my institute is in the second biggest town of Austria. It's still quite small, only 300,000 inhabitants. It's called Graz, and my organization is called the Inter-University Research Center for Technology, Work and Culture. We're here for more than 25 years now, and here you see a picture of myself 10 years ago. I'm a bit older now, and I also show you a picture of our nice city. Even nicer now because it's autumn. This picture is probably from a different. It might be from spring. Okay, now to the calculation. So at the beginning of our project, we had the idea that if we want to calculate the environmental savings between a green product and a conventional product, we should take a look at the whole life cycle of the product, of the green product and of the benchmark, and also take a look at the whole environmental impact, and then to compare these. But we found very fast at the beginning of our project that this is not possible to do because it would include too much work and too much effort, and therefore we included limitations. So we decided to limit our scope, and first of all, instead of the whole life cycle, we decided to take a look only at the use phase, and secondly, instead of taking a look at the whole environmental impact, we decided to look only at the energy consumption, and not the primary energy consumption, but the energy consumption. You might all know the difference. So the energy consumption, for example, is the kilowatt hours that I use for my desktop, and the primary energy consumption, that would be the energy content of the energy sources that I used to produce these kilowatt hours that I need for to work with my notebook. So we have only the energy consumption, and the second environmental impact that we took a look at are the greenhouse gas emissions. So let me show you this again in form of a picture. So here you see the system, the whole life cycle. You see the three phases of the life cycle: the production phase, the use phase, and the end of life phase. And you have an input in the system. That's, for example, the raw material, the energy sources, and the water that you need. You have this input in the production phase. For example, if I take as a product the notebook, I have the production phase of the notebook, and I use different raw materials, energy, water, etc. Then I have the use phase where I need energy, cleaning agents, for example. And at the end of life, we also need something to decouple or to recycle or to do whatever. So, and next to the input, we also have the output. In each of the life cycle stages, we have the emissions, for example, we have the waste, etc. So, and like I already mentioned, in our project, we decided to focus on the use phase and to focus here on the input energy consumption. And the important thing is with the energy consumption, so we took a look at how much energy, for example, the notebook needs, for example, how many kilowatt hours. And here we also took a look at the production of this energy consumption, of this energy. Excuse me? Yeah, okay, so the use phase is our focus. So let me explain it again in different words. What do we include in our calculators? First of all, we use the direct greenhouse gas emissions. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the differentiation between direct and indirect greenhouse gas emissions. So the direct greenhouse gas emissions are the emissions that occur, for example, while the vehicle is driving. So these direct greenhouse gas emissions are included in our calculator. The indirect greenhouse gas emissions, that are the emissions that occur during the generation. They are only included for the energy. So for the production of the energy, the greenhouse gas emissions that occur, they are included, but not the others. And most importantly, all the other indirect greenhouse gas emissions, like the emissions that occur in the production of the vehicle or of the notebook, they are not included. Okay, and secondly, we had limitations in the environmental impact categories. And I'm not sure if you are familiar with life cycle analysis or assessments. In the life cycle analysis, we have different kinds of impact categories. For example, climate change, photochemical ozone formation, we have acidification, nutrient enrichment, stratospheric ozone depletion, human toxicity, ecotoxicity, resource depletion. So these are all environmental impact categories that you usually take a look at if you have if you want to have an estimation about an environmental impact. And furthermore, sometimes there is energy consumption. So energy consumption is directly linked to the resource depletion. But in our case, we only have the energy consumption, therefore I included it here. So these are all the environmental impact categories. And in traditional life cycle assessment, you have these are midpoint categories. So these impact categories are called midpoint categories, and you can further aggregate them to endpoint categories, and then you have only three more categories: human health, natural resources, and the natural environment. And some of the life cycle assessments that are where the results are out today focus on the midpoint categories, other focus further aggregate midpoint categories and offer the results in endpoint categories. So this is just small information about life cycle assessment to show you what we did. So we focused with our calculations on just two of the midpoint categories. The first is the climate change, and the second is the energy consumption. So you see that it's in a way limited, but at the moment there is no. From our point of view, we couldn't do it in a more holistic way. Okay, let's come back to the picture. You see now, again, the limitations. We focused on the use phase, we focused on the energy consumption necessary in the use phase, and we focused on the climate change category. That means that we focused on the emissions of CO2, methane, on nitrous oxide, and hydrofluorocarbons. That are the four most important emissions that are included if you take a look at the climate change impact. And just to show you, for afterwards, when we are going to see the calculator, we are going to calculate tons of CO2 emissions, and to remind you about the dimensions. I wanted to show you now the carbon footprint of different countries. So you see here, these are European countries, and you see, for example, that in Austria, Österreich, I don't have the number here, but for the EU 28, we have an average of 9 tons per person greenhouse gas emissions per year. So, and the target, the international target that was decided, I think, in 2010, that the target is for the amount of persons that were living at the time, that each person should not there shouldn't be an emission per person greater than 2.7 tons per person in a year. So that's not very much. So the method, when to calculate. I show you here the tendering process. So the tendering process usually starts with a needs assessment or market research, and afterwards, if you know what the market is available to offer, you start with the development of your tender. And once you have the tender documents, you start the tendering and you start the award of the tender. So you have a company that is going to supply you with the goods that you wanted to have. And afterwards, you could, I'm not sure that it's often done, but you could estimate the environmental impact, but we suggest that you do it, and also use longer monitoring. For example, if you tender for a building, you should at least monitor the energy consumption of this building, this house. So, and where to use our calculator? We suggest that you use a calculator during your development of the tender documents. So once you know the market and you want to decide which environmental criteria to use for your tender documents, you could use the calculation or the calculators to see what environmental impact you are going to generate with these environmental criteria. And you could further use our calculators after the tendering procedure to estimate the environmental impact. So you could also decide to use it in the tender documents, so that you tell the tenderers that they use in the calculators and tell them that they have to calculate the CO2 emissions of their offer, and for offers with a very small environmental impact, you give bonus points. So you could decide that, but we in our project we didn't suggest it. Okay, so the whole method of the calculation is based on the fact that we have the low carbon solution, and you compare the environmental impact, in this case the energy consumption in the use phase and the CO2 emissions in the use phase of the low carbon solution with the energy consumption and the CO2 emissions of the benchmark. And the benchmark could be, for example, in this diagram, the solution you choose in the last tender. It could be an average solution on the market. It could also be a solution that you define yourself. And the difference between the CO2 emissions, the amount of the low carbon solution and the benchmark is the environmental relief. And that is the figure that you want to achieve with the help of this calculation. So again, the choice of benchmark that you use is going to depend on the product group and the information that is available on the market. So, for example, if you decide or if you want to tender a notebook, the ICT market is changing rapidly. So we wouldn't suggest that for a notebook you take as a benchmark the solution that you bought in the last tender, because it might be 2 or 3 years ago and the market changed, and so this is quite old, and the energy efficiency of the products currently on the market is so much better, then you always should take a look at the products available on the market. But for a product group like, for example, street lighting didn't change for years. So right now, street lighting is changing because you have LED bulbs, but 10 years ago, street lighting didn't change. So you could have taken the solution of the last tender. Okay, therefore it depends on the product group. So again, the possibilities that you can use to choose a benchmark is the last tender, which is most convenient usually, because you have numbers for the energy consumption of the products of the last tender. As a solution you could define by yourself. What I liked, especially in the ICT product groups, that to take a product that just meets the criteria of an environmental certificate. And for the ICT products, we usually took the Energy Star. So we took a look at the Energy Star criteria, and we calculated the energy consumption of a product that just meets the Energy Star criteria, and we use this product as a benchmark. And you could also use the worst product in the market. We did this, but the Commission, they weren't very happy with that. We did this for 1 or 2 products or tender models, and they weren't very happy, and they are right in a sense that with the worst product in the market, yes, you get huge savings, which are not always realistic, because you can't assume that the public procurers, if they don't use energy efficient criteria, get the worst product on the market. And you could also use an average product on the market, but I think that this is very difficult to define. So how do you define an average product in the market in average in means of energy efficiency? What is average for a notebook of a certain function? So, and let me add at this moment that the benchmark and the green product or the low carbon solution should always have the same function, yes, otherwise this is the basis for your comparison. Okay, when to use this method? So, because we have these limitations, we take only a look at the use phase, and we only take a look at the environmental impact, means CO2 emissions and energy consumption. We suggest that we use our method only for the tendering of energy, or for the tendering of products that have a relevant energy consumption during the use phase. For example, a notebook or a washing machine or a vehicle. But we don't suggest that you use it, for example, for cleaning agents, because for cleaning agents, you usually have other environmental impact categories that are relevant. For example, toxicity is very important there, or nutrient enrichment, but it's not energy efficiency. Okay, and we developed in our project calculators for the following 4 product groups. The first is energy, the second is ICT, the third is street lighting, and the fourth is vehicles. And in several minutes, I'm going to show you, or to introduce you to one or 2 of these calculators. And our approach on the project was, at first, if you want to calculate in our project, if somebody or a partner wanted to calculate the environmental impact of the green tender, The first question was, is there a GPP 2020 calculator available for this product group? And if yes, please use the calculator. If no, the question was, is there any other reliable calculator available? If yes, but that is the question, what is reliable? But if yes, use this calculator. For example, our Dutch colleagues, they use the tool DuboCalc. And I'm going to talk about DuboCalc later, but this is a reliable calculator. So with reliable, it means that you know all the figures that are used, and it has a database in the background that is reliable. So we suggest that you use this calculator. But if there is no reliable calculator available, you could take a look if you find reliable LCA results. So if there are reliable LCA results, you could use the LCA results. For example, in our project, we had tenders about where the paper was bought. So we took a look at life cycle assessments for paper, and we found some which are reliable in a sense that these life cycle assessments offered information about the data they used, about the system, about everything, about how they worked. And then we decided that we could use these LCA results. But usually, if you find a report about a life cycle assessment, you probably have difficulties to get all the information. They are just the results, but the whole beginning of the life cycle assessment, so the system that was chosen, the data that was used, that is often not transparent. And if there is no transparency, we suggest that you don't use the LCA results to calculate savings. And if you don't use them, we just suggest that you shouldn't quantify the savings. We think it's much better that you describe them in a qualitative way, so describe them with words. Okay, so now we are going to take a look at one or two calculators. I'm not sure yet now if anyone has a suggestion. Would you like to see the ICT calculator, the energy calculator, the lighting calculator, or the vehicles calculator? So I'll wait now for your comments. Otherwise, if nobody is going to comment, Philip, please tell me what I'm going to choose. So
Angelika, maybe we have time for two. So I was just proposing vehicles and lighting.
here you find also a video tutorial about our 4 calculators. So this is a native speaker, a colleague of mine who developed these calculators, and I wanted to show them to you, but now you have to stick with my Dinglish, and so I start the vehicles calculator. Oh, excuse me, no. That was wrong. I have to go to the exercise. Vehicles calculator, you can download them here. don't know why it just doesn't open. I'm sorry. I haven't opened it before. Sorry. Okay, you'll see it now? Yeah, does it work?
Yes, I can see it.
Fine, great. So for the vehicles calculator, we have 3 sheets. The first is the basic sheet, and on the basic sheet, we have a short introduction into the calculator. So who developed it, what kind of vehicles we are going to what we can take a look at. I'm going to show you that so we don't have to worry with this anymore. Then we have the general assumption sheet, the third sheet, where we included all the information about, for example, the energy content of diesel fuel. And the main sheet is the input result sheet. And you see here we have different kinds of fuels. Here on the vertical fields. And in the horizontal fields, you see, first of all, the benchmark. So the benchmark solution that you choose. Then we see in the bigger green, the low carbon solution. You have to include here the information about the low carbon solution. And here on the right field, the blue field, there you see the savings. Okay, so let's assume that we want to buy 1,000 vehicles. Yeah, and the benchmark, as benchmark, we choose diesel powered vehicle, and as a low carbon solution, we choose electric vehicles. So we have, I think 1,000 is a little bit much, but 100 vehicles. Or we can only, let's say 10 vehicles. So 10 vehicles, then we have to include here the information about the average distance per vehicle during the lifetime in kilometer. So let's assume that we drive this vehicle 25,000 kilometers per year, and that we are going to use the vehicle for 6 years. So we have 150,000 kilometers that we are going to drive the vehicle per lifetime. So the kind of fuel that we are going to use is diesel fuel. And so the vehicle, you have only to include numbers in the orange fields. The green fields, this is already fixed. If we want to use, for example, petroleum, then the energy content of the fuel is automatically changing. But we want to use diesel fuel. And then we need the amount of fuel that our benchmark car is going to use per 100 kilometers. So I assume that we could use the vehicles that we bought in the last tender. And let's say that the vehicle that we bought in the last tender used 6.5 liter of diesel per 100 kilometers. So you see now that the calculator is calculating the total amount of fuel during the lifetime of all the vehicles. So, and the calculator also calculates the energy content, and the energy content in this case is tons of oil equivalents of the fuel used during the lifetime. And it also calculates the indirect and the direct CO2 emissions per lifetime. So the indirect are the CO2 emissions that occur during the production of the diesel. The direct CO2 emissions are the emissions that occur during the usage of the vehicles. So we have here for 10 vehicles 84 tons of oil equivalents, and we have 269 tons of indirect and direct CO2 emissions per lifetime. Okay, now we are going to take a look at the low carbon solution, but before we do that, you see here a small field where we have to include the country that we are currently in. So I'm going to use Austria, and then the calculator is offering me the CO2 emissions per kilowatt hours. So this are now the CO2 emissions for the electricity. And this is a national, this is a figure for the national electricity mix. If you have for example, if you're going to buy photovoltaic plants, or if the public organization is going to build photovoltaic plants, you can also use different number. In this case, you go to the general assumption. You go here, assumptions for the low carbon solution. You go, you go to the general assumptions down here, excuse me. And you find here the CO2 emissions for the national electricity mix. This is a figure offered by the European Environmental Agency. It's a little bit older. If you have newer values for your country, please use them. And you can just go here, for example, I could now go here. I know our national environmental organizations offer a different number. It offers 0.280 kilogram CO2 emissions per kilowatt hours. So now we have here a different figure. So I'm not going to use this figure for our calculations. Okay, so now we are going to the low carbon solution. We also have 10 vehicles, and we also, so you should use the same amount of kilometers per lifetime. I know that with an electric vehicle, you don't have the same, probably smaller distances, but I guess that the distance of 25,000 kilometers per year is no problem for an electric vehicle. Therefore, I use 150,000 kilometers per lifetime too. Okay, and now the electricity is offered here as the only kind of fuel because it's an electro engine. And now we have to include an amount of fuel per 100 kilometer. So how much kilowatt hours does the low carbon solution need? I suggest it needs, let's say 12 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometers. Okay, and now we get the energy content, that is 15 tons of oil equivalents, and the CO2 emissions per lifetime are 50, at least in Austria, because we have a low amount of CO2 emissions per kilowatt hour, because we use a lot of hydropower. So, and here you have the savings. So if you choose the low carbon solution instead of the benchmark, you're going to save 68 tons of oil equivalents. You're going to save 218 tons of CO2 in the lifetime. And this is a reduction of 82% of energy savings, and it's a reduction of 81% of CO2 savings. And if you are interested in costs now, we don't have the costs included in this calculator, only in the ICT calculator, but you could also include the costs, or here just make a small calculation. You have the amount of, you can calculate the amount of fuel, and if you have the costs of diesel and of electricity, you can calculate the cost savings too. Okay, So this is the vehicle calculator. It's quite easy. You can change the general assumptions, and here you can calculate. If you have a tender with different kinds of engines, with several cars, different kinds of engines, we suggest that you do the calculation for each of the engines and that you make a compared calculation at the end. So, okay, so this is the vehicles calculator. Now I'm going to show you the lighting calculator. So the lighting calculator has a similar outfit as the vehicles calculator. We have the basics website, the basic sheet with all the information. We have the general assumption sheet, and we have the input and result sheets. And this is most important, and we're going to go there. And here you also see an information about the location where we are situated. So again, we take Austria. And again, we are going to change the emission factor for the electricity in Austria. So we don't use 0.161 kilogram CO2 emissions per kilowatt hours, but 0.280. And now we have to write in the orange cells information. So the first information that the calculator is asking us is the time that you are going to use the street lighting system, and let's say we are going to use it for 25 years. So, and here you have two options. You have the benchmark and you have a low carbon solution. So in the benchmark, you could write in a name, but here we suggest that you choose just type 2 and type 1 and type 2. Type 2, you could write a different name, is conventional system. Yeah, and the benchmark is now not the old system, but a conventional system, not with LED lights. And the new one would be one with LED lighting. And the name of the manufacturer is not important to us. So now you have the question, how many light fixtures or luminaries do you have? If you're a smaller municipality, let's say that you have 100 luminaries with the conventional system. And now the question is, first of all, how much lamps do you have in the luminary, and how much power does each lamp have? And are there different levels? So, for example, different levels could occur if you reduce the lighting in the night. If you if you have a dimming function. So let's say in the conventional system, power per lamp, including operational losses, would be 80 watt per lamp, and that you had number of lamps per just one. And in the new system, we also have, or we don't have 100 anymore, but we have 80. So we reduce the number of lighting fixtures. Light fixtures with our LED lighting. We have a power per lamp, just let's say 60. Yeah, 60 is okay. And we have two levels. So in the evening, or if nobody's coming along, we reduce the level, so it's not the same brightness. So we use it to 30 watt, and number of lamps is also only 1. And the operating time for level 1, so how much hours do we have? I guess 8,760 hours per year. So let's assume that we use this conventional system per year 4,000 hours. And our low carbon solution, we suggest that we use level 1 for 2,500 hours and the level 2 for 1,500 hours, so also for 4,000 hours. And here now at the end you see that for benchmark we have energy savings per year. Energy consumption per year. So for the benchmark, we have 32,000 kilowatt hours per year that the benchmark consumes. And for the low carbon solution, we have 15,600 kilowatt hours per year. So this is 3 tons of oil equivalents per year. It's 69 tons of oil equivalents per lifetime, which is 25 years. And the CO2 emissions, for Austria at least, are 9 tons of CO2 per year. And the CO2 emissions per lifetime are 224 tons of CO2 per lifetime. So for the low carbon solutions, you find the figures here. And here in the right row, in the blue row, you find the savings. So we have 1 tons of oil equivalent per year. We have 35 tons of oil equivalent per lifetime that are saved. We have 5 tons of CO2 that are saved per year, and then 115 tons of CO2 per lifetime. So these are savings of 51%. So the numbers might not be as positive in reality, because I used numbers that show you that there are savings, but if you have savings of 25%, that's not that bad. Okay, these are the 2 calculators. The ICT calculator is a little bit more complicated because we have different products like notebooks and desktop PCs, but at the end it's the same idea, the same function, and the same design. So now at the end I would like to go to the tender models to show you how our tender models looked and what kind of savings we calculated. So I go back to our website, and here under low carbon tenders we have best practice examples. And here in the best practice examples you find our 114, I think, tenders, or at least no, we have 109 results, and we have tenders for products, for services, and for works. And okay, what shall we take? So I just take the first example. Here you see, if you scroll down, you have all the tender models. You have, you could also, you have here all, for example, I just want to have tender models for products. Then I click on the button products, and now I have only the tender models for the products. It's 67 results. Okay, so I'm interested in the tender model for the purchase of portable lighting masts with LED lights that was done by the Procurement Office of the Federal Ministry of the Interior. I click here, and here I can download the whole tender model. Okay, and here on the first side you find a small introduction, what was procured. So it was an open procedure, and it was, and the electricity savings were could be reached by the use of LED lighting solutions. So this is a portable lighting source, and here you see the benchmark. So devices that were procured in 2004 are used as a benchmark for the last tender. The low carbon solution is a lighting mast with LED technology in the green field, and here in blue you find the solutions, the results of our calculation. But this is just the Zusammenfassung This is just an excerpt of the result.
Summary.
A summary, thank you. This is just a summary. Here you find information about the contract that was tendered, the volume, for example. Here you find the procurement approach. So this is just information, what was included in the criteria development, some information. And then you find the results of our calculation. And below the results, you find the basis for the calculation. So, for example, the results, the CO2 emission for 10 years. So it was assumed that the portable lighting mask would be used for 10 years. So we compared the benchmark, the previous device with halogen lights and a metal vapor. And we compared them to the green solution, the lighting masks with LED. The CO2 emissions you find here for the previous device were 296 tons of CO2 equivalents, and the lighting mask was LED 82.7. So you have the reductions here, the same for the energy use. And here are the basis of calculations. So the old lighting mask was equipped with 2 halogen lights with 1,000 watts each, and 4 metal vapor lighting with 1,500 watts. There is 1 zero too much, I'm sorry for that. But then they consumed diesel fuel, and they consumed 2.15 liter per diesel fuel per hour. And the low carbon solution now are masks with 8 LED lights with 183 watts each, and the consumption of diesel watts is only 1.6 liter per hour. And the operation hours are the same for the benchmark and for the low carbon solution. It's 500 hours per year. The number of purchased lighting masks are 10. The lifespan is 10 years. And as emission factor, we use the number 2.755 kilo CO2 equivalents per liter diesel. So this information is included, and the results are shown above. And there are further environmental relevant conclusions, but this is the way our tender models look. So we have 109, and I can only suggest, if you have time, to take a look at one or the other. And before I finish my presentation, I would like to show you a tender model for works that was developed by the Dutch colleagues. And the Dutch colleagues, they used their own calculator, and this calculator is called DuboCalc. So let's take a look, and I would like to show you. So, for example, what can we take? Well, there are 15 results. Let's take one of them first. Okay. So the Dutch colleagues, they tendered infrastructure. And in this case, they tendered the reconstruction of the guard lock near the town Limmel. So it's like Waterstaat in the Netherlands, and here you see a picture of a guard lock. And here also you see the results. And the important thing is here a picture, the procurement approach. And I would like now to introduce you to the procurement approach. And I don't have slides, but I can just explain it in words. So they have the calculation tool that is called DuboCalc. And DuboCalc, unfortunately, is not a calculation tool that is available to everybody. They have a license for that because it uses the figures of a database, and you have to buy the data. So therefore, unfortunately, they can't use the DuboCalc for everybody. But I'm not so much interested in the DuboCalc, but in the procurement procedure. And so they offer the Dubo-Calc to the tenderers. And before they, during the development of the tender documents, they meet with different experts, and they decide how a resource and energy efficient solution for this guard look, for example, could look. So they develop a design for a guard look that, from their point of view, is environmental friendly because it offers the same functionality, but it uses a low amount of transport, a low amount of resources. And they use then, for their design, they estimate the amount of material they are going to need. And they put all these numbers in the Dubo-Calc. And the Dubo-Calc is not has not so many limitations like our calculators. The Dubo-Calc takes a look at 11 different environmental effects. So they also take a look at the human toxicity, at the ozone layer depletion, all the environmental impact categories that I've presented at the beginning of my presentation. So they put all the amount of energy and resources that they are going to use for their design, for their environmental friendly design, in the Dubo-Calc. And the Dubo-Calc is offering an environmental cost indicator value. So they are the Dubo-Calc is offering a value. For example, for this design, a number of environmental cost indicators, for example, 200,000 points for the environmental cost indicator is going to be needed for this environmental friendly design. So let's see, it's written here how many points they awarded. So here you see that they developed an environmental friendly design with a lifetime of 75 years. And according to the professional knowledge, the project team expected that the most optimal design could have an ECI value of as low as 900,000. So, and then they decided, so they give the Dubo-Calc to the tenderers, and the tenderers have to make their own design. And they calculate for their own design the amount of energy and the amount of resources they are going to use. And they have to include it in the Dubo-Calc that is given to them. And they also calculate an ECI value. And if the value is as low as 900,000, they got a fictional deduction of their bidding price. And at the beginning, so the recorder start, they decide when an ECI value is as low as 900,000, a fictional deduction of the bidding price would be, in this case, 5,500,000 euros. And if the design is not as environmental friendly as these 900,000 points, so if it gets more environmental bad points, in this case, they go until 1,140,000. In this case, so a design that gets as many points as 1,140,000, no deduction from the bidding price is given. But in between, so if a design has more than 900,000 ECI points, but less than 1,140,000 points, they would get also a fictional deduction of the bidding price, but the more ECI points they have, the lesser the bidding price deduction is going to be. Yeah. So if a tenderer has now, for example, a bidding price of 80 million euros and an ECI value of 900,000, then the bid of this tenderer or this supplier is going to be reduced 18 million minus 5.5 million. So we have 74.5 million is the bidding price. So the fictional bidding price, because if this is the lowest price at the end, and this tenderer is going to get the tender, then he gets his 80 million euros that he was asking for. It's not only a fictional deduction. So let's see what we had in this case. So I can't find it. So in the end, here we have the
results table.
Thank you. The winner offered an ECI value of 900,000 points, and this equals the minimum that was possible, and it assured him the maximum fictional deduction of 5.5 million euros. So the bidding price corrected for the fictional deduction was, so the bidding price was not, like I said, 80 million, but it was only 26 million, and it was reduced by these 5.5 million for the maximal, for the minimal ECI value, and it was also further reduced, but this is of no importance for us now. So, and because at the end, this bidder, the supplier, or this company offered a bid for 19.6 million euro fictional. It was the lowest corrected fictional bidding price. He got it. And therefore, yeah. So this is the way that the Dutch colleagues found their the best bidder by using fictional deductions and by using a different calculation tool. But I think that also, if you have no, or we have no, we can't use a Dubo calculator. We could use something similar with our calculators, but we haven't done it now in our project. But if you are available, if you are interested, you could use it in one of your, or if you are talking to public procurers, you could further take this idea and inform them that something like that is possible. Okay. I hope that you could follow my my meanings and my words, and I'm now looking forward to have your questions. We still have 25 minutes, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Angelika, for this very nice and comprehensive presentation on the GPP 2020 approach towards calculating CO2 emissions and energy savings. Do you have a slide with your contact details, just in case somebody wants to contact you?
Yes, I have. I have it here. Perfect,
thanks a lot. You can just leave this like this. So you are all invited to raise your hand if you have a question. How to do this? Next to your name, under the participants pane, you have basically functions, and you can raise your hand there. Peter, could you show us how this works, maybe? Peter Di Franceschi, could you raise your hand? So this is Peter raising his hand, although I guess at this very moment he doesn't have something to say. If you accidentally raised your hand, then you can also remove this. So now Peter no longer is there. This is with all remarks you can do. So Pui, you could also delete your question mark there. I see it. The floor is open. Does anybody have a question? You always have to wait at least 10 seconds. The 10 seconds are now over. Does anybody have a question to what Angelika Tisch presented? Angelika, I have the feeling that everything was crystal clear and perfectly presented, and no questions from the audience. There's one. No. Savas from Cyprus is having a question. I give the floor to you, Savas. Maybe you can introduce yourself, where you're from.
Yes, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Angelica, for the presentation. I'm Savas from the Cyprus Energy Agency, and I would like to ask something about the benchmark selection. So it is quite challenging to find the benchmark for different kind of categories, and I'm wondering whether do you suggest to use the existing situation as a benchmark. For example, for street lighting, you have to replace an existing light bulb with a new one, then the benchmark would be the existing, even if it's 20 years old, let's say. What do you recommend for this?
Okay, yeah, it depends, yeah. So for street lighting that is 20 years old, I would suggest that you take a look at the market. At the market, there are still other lighting systems than LED. So just take a look at the current situation on the market. And I would even suggest that you take two benchmarks. You could take the current solutions. So 20 years ago, what did they buy? And you could further take a look at the market, at the conventional solution that is there. And then you have your green lighting solution. So why not take two benchmarks? I would suggest to take two, yes, in this case. And it's quite challenging always also to define what is the current conventional solution available on the market. So yeah, probably you should talk to the, I'm pretty sure that you're not going to procure yourself. Are you from an energy agency? Mike Stavash?
Yes. Yeah, I am for an energy agency. I don't procure for myself, but we do support public authorities to launch a tender, and yeah.
But pretty sure the public authorities will be more familiar with the market of street lighting than you are probably. Or so I suggest that you ask these public procurers what they know about the market and what the current conventional solution is from their point of view. What do you think about that?
I'm not really sure if they are well aware about the market. This is one of the barriers that we have in Cyprus, that the procurers are not up to date with what is available to the market. Mm-hmm. So it's something that we need to do as supporters. And yeah, and they usually understand more what we pay today, what we consume today with the existing situation, and what's gonna be the future with the proposed solution.
Okay, but then the benchmark depends also on the interests of the public procurers. So yeah. For what do they want to use the figures? So do they want to tell the inhabitants, for example, we have the reductions compared to the old solution? So it's completely fine to take the current solution and not to take a look at the conventional solution on the market that's currently available.
Yeah, it might be a good idea to present both benchmarks. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Angelica.
So are there any other questions?
Maybe, Angelica, we have one or the other tender model on street lighting, and you have been our internal help desk for the calculations on those street lighting things. Maybe you can run us quickly through. How did you do? What were the cases? I remember one from Croatia. We had the light masts already. How did you do it there?
So we had two from Croatia, and the Croatian body, they offered the values, and they talked to the public procurers. And in the first tender model, shall I open it or shall I just talk about it, Philip? Probably I just talk about it. So in the first tender model, we used the current situation. So they took a look at what was used currently, and after that, after our first year, the Commission told us that they are not very happy that we use the current situation on the market. They would like to see the benchmark as things that are currently really available on the market. So in the second Croatian tender model, we used the current average situation on the market. So this was a light bulb, no LED light bulb, but a conventional light bulb.
And how was this calculated, the average solution?
How it was calculated? So it was calculated with a calculator, and so our partner, so Admir, he suggested the values, and I just accepted them. And I'm pretty sure that he developed them together with the public authorities. So in this case, they knew what the solution is. I'm not sure how. Probably they make a small market research. They took a look at what is currently available. If I don't take an LED lighting, if I don't use a dimming function, what is there? So, and then they decided for one of those systems available.
Yeah, indeed. I personally think that's a good example, also important for GreenS, because we are having also market engagement activities there, market sounding, market surveys, all these kind of things. So asking there the right questions for being able later to potentially calculate or sell savings is a good point to mention.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions? Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philip. Well, I'm Peter. You all know me, so I don't have to present myself from ICLE here in Brussels. I just wanted to follow up about the benchmark, what Savas asked Angelica. So if you said take two benchmarks, but I'm not fully sure I understood that, because eventually you have to take one benchmark. So you look at what has been, I don't know, in this case of Savas, been procured in the last 20 years, and you look what's currently on the market, and then you try to get an intermediary figure, or how would you take two benchmarks, which may be quite different?
Okay, I could, for example, first make a calculation. Hi, Peter, first of all. So I could make a calculation between the first benchmark I've chosen, so that what is currently used, and an LED solution that I want to procure. So I have a huge saving probably. And afterwards, I could make the calculation between the energy consumption of the LED solution that I would like to procure and the conventional solution available on the market. So there my savings are probably lower. But I have now then two figures. If I choose CO2 or if I choose also energy consumption, I have four figures, and I can use them for different meanings. For example, if I talk to the mayor or somebody whom I want to convince that he has to include green criteria, I can show him even both figures and say we have these savings compared to our current solution, or we have those savings if we buy even better than what's currently on the market.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a calculation more, and I think it could be helpful to if you want to convince anyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks to this, so it depends also on the target group where you want to launch the communication, so basically those figures.
And may I ask you how many tenders you are going to develop in the course of the project? Is there a figure or?
Savas or Filippo, I think it's 6 tenders per energy agency. I think it's 48 tenders, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's 3 pilot projects per country.
Okay, and
3 pilots per country, that makes 24.
And the pilots are also in the fields that we were discussing, or are there different product groups that you take a look at?
Now we're in the process of identifying the pilot projects.
And are you already do you already have a hunch or an idea in what direction it goes?
It depends on the availability of the templates that we have produced, and this is about street lighting, IT equipment, and vehicles. But yeah, those three will be the main categories of products and services.
Thanks for this. Are there any further questions for anybody, from anybody?
So I could just add, if you have any problems with your calculation, or you can always contact me. I have many experience. I've made many experiences, and I can also tell you what you shouldn't do. Not only best practice, but also bad practice.
Thanks a lot, Angelika, for this. Okay, last possibility to raise your hand to ask a question. Peter, I guess you have a second question, or? Peter?
Okay. Yes. No, I was just thinking, like, if you are aware, Angelika, have you been contacted outside GPP 2020 from other project consortia or procurers in Europe about this, just a curiosity about these calculators? Any interest?
Peter, could you repeat that?
Yes. No, I was just thinking that out of curiosity, because this is a very interesting and useful calculator, and I really want to thank you about the explanation. I was wondering whether outside GPP 2020 you have been approached about these calculators from other procurers or people interested.
Not yet, no. And I had one encounter, yes, and I had several encounters, but all was taking place in our GPP meeting at the end, for example. There were people from the European Commission who were procuring, who were interested in the calculations. But I also became aware of the fact that some people think it's too basic, so they want a more comprehensive calculator, because from their point of view, just the use phase and just CO2 and energy might be not enough. And I always would suggest that this is, for the first step, completely ausreichend, completely. So it's
sufficient, yes.
Sufficient to start with, to start low, and for example, if you have LCA data that is more comprehensive, you could go a step further. But at the beginning, I would only suggest that please take the slower steps, and it's fine like that. Yes, you get good values if you concentrate on these product groups where it makes sense. So please don't take cleaning agents with these calculators. You can't, because we have no calculator, but the methodology is not only good for these energy-consuming products.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you very much. Last chance to raise your hand. This is not the case. Then, Angelika, I would like to thank you very, very much for your time and efforts, not only over the past 3 years, put into this project and the outcomes. I know that there are many people around asking me for reference input, case studies, so there's coming up something more. And I think also for the GreenS project, it could be some useful tools, some useful reference, and thanks again for sharing your contact details. If anybody has a question to CO2 or energy savings, you are welcome to approach Angelika. That was the fourth webinar of the GreenS project. I hope you enjoyed it. We will have 2 more that will come across in October, November time. And so stay tuned and see you soon. Talk to you. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.